Zila woke up with a start, the sudden jolt of the ship's crash still echoing in her head. Her hands gripped the cold, metal surface of the control panel, trying to steady herself. Around her, the ship groaned and hissed, its systems failing one by one. Her heart raced as she scanned the console. There was no sign of life, no communication from the crew. The once proud vessel of her people, the Tseril, was now a broken hulk drifting in the vast emptiness of space. "Mother," a soft voice interrupted her thoughts. Sela turned to see her daughter, Lyra, standing behind her. The little girl looked scared, her large, blue eyes wide in fear. She was holding a small stuffed animal close to her chest, a gift from their home planet. Sela's heart tightened at the sight of her child. Lyra was too young to understand the gravity of their situation, but Sela couldn't hide her fear. The Tseril were a proud, advanced species, but now, stranded on an unknown world, their survival depended on the two of them alone. "Are we going to be okay, Mother?" Lyra asked, her voice trembling. Zila forced a smile, though it didn't reach her eyes. "We'll be fine, little one," she said, trying to sound confident. "We just need to stay calm." The crash had left them in a strange, unfamiliar place, an unknown planet. It was far from anything Sela had ever encountered. She didn't know whether it was hostile or safe. The ship was in ruins, and communication with any of the other survivors had failed. Her heart sank as she realized that the rest of her people might be lost forever. There were only the two of them now, stranded and alone. Sela stood up slowly, her body sore from the crash. She moved toward the rear of the ship, where their supplies were stored. With the power flickering on and off, she could barely see what she was doing. She gathered what she could: food rations, water, and a few essential tools. She turned back to Lyra, who had followed her into the ship's main cabin. "I have to check the outside, Lyra," Sela said softly. "Stay here and be safe, okay?" Lyra nodded, clutching her stuffed animal tighter. Zila's heart ached as she kissed the top of her daughter's head and stepped out of the wreckage. The planet's atmosphere was thick, and the air smelled of earth and rain. Sela's boots crunched against the soft ground as she took her first steps on this strange world. The sky was a strange shade of orange, and the terrain stretched out in all directions, covered with thick trees and strange plants she didn't recognize. It was beautiful, but in the back of her mind, Sela knew that beauty could be deceiving. She walked cautiously, her senses alert. She needed to find shelter and assess their surroundings. It wouldn't take long for them to run out of food or water. The crash had destroyed most of their supplies, and Sela had no idea how long it would take for anyone to find them, if anyone even knew they were here. Hours passed as Sela explored. She came across strange animal tracks, but nothing dangerous. Yet, the planet seemed peaceful, but Sela didn't trust it. Her people had been betrayed before by peaceful-looking worlds that hid deadly secrets. She needed to be careful. Eventually, she found a small cave hidden behind a cluster of rocks. It was a safe place, far from any immediate danger. She marked the location on a small portable map, then returned to the ship to gather Lyra. The young girl had fallen asleep in the cabin, her breathing soft and steady. Sela hated waking her, but there was no choice. She gently shook Lyra awake. "We have to go, sweetheart," Sela whispered. "I found a safe place." Lyra groggily rubbed her eyes. "Is it safe, Mother?" Sela nodded, though the truth was, she didn't know for sure. "Yes, it's safe for now." They left the wreckage behind, walking carefully toward the cave. Lyra held tightly to her mother's hand, her little feet struggling to keep up with the pace. Sela didn't mind. As long as Lyra was with her, she would protect her no matter what. The journey to the cave felt longer than it was. Sela's mind raced with thoughts of how they could survive. She had learned to be resourceful, but this situation was unlike any she had faced before. As she looked down at Lyra, her determination grew. She couldn't fail her daughter. Not now, not when they were so alone. When they reached the cave, Sela settled them in. The air inside was cool, and the space was wide enough to fit the two of them comfortably. She spread out a small blanket on the ground and took a moment to breathe. She had to keep calm, for Lyra's sake. That night, as they huddled together for warmth, Scylla thought about what had happened. The war, the escape, the betrayal, and now, the sea. Rash. Her species had once been mighty, with ships that could travel across galaxies and technology that could change the course of the universe. But now, all that was gone. She didn't even know if there were any others left. The thought made her heart heavy with grief. "Mother." Lyra's voice interrupted her thoughts. "Are you okay?" Scylla looked down at her daughter, forcing a smile. "I'm fine, little one. We're going to make it through this. Together." But deep inside, Scylla wondered how much longer they could survive in this strange, unforgiving place, and if help would ever come. The days that followed the crash were difficult. Scylla and Lyra woke each morning to a world of uncertainty. The cave, their only shelter, was safe for now, but it felt empty without the sounds of other survivors. Scylla had tried calling out on their ship's emergency frequency, but there was no response. She tried not to think about it too much. There was nothing she could do except survive and protect her daughter. Scylla had once been part of a mighty race. Her people, the Tseril, were known for their advanced technology and their wisdom. But now, Scylla felt like a shadow of the warrior she once was. Without a ship to explore the stars, without allies to help, she and Lyra were alone. The planet around them was beautiful, but it was wild and dangerous. The lush forests and vibrant skies hid creatures Scylla didn't understand. Some of them had already shown their teeth, but nothing had attacked yet. At least they had food. Scylla was skilled in finding edible plants and fruits, and Lyra had quickly learned how to identify the safest ones. Scylla was proud of how strong her daughter had become in such a short time. Lyra's innocence, though, was still evident. She smiled and laughed, played with her stuffed animal, as though everything was normal. Scylla wanted to hold on to those moments, to protect Lyra's childlike joy, but reality kept pulling her back. "Look, Mother." Lyra's voice rang out, bright and full of excitement. Scylla turned to see her daughter holding up a small glowing rock she had found near the stream. Scylla smiled softly. "That's beautiful, Lyra, but remember, we don't know if it's safe to touch everything." Lyra nodded but didn't look worried. She had always been a curious child, and this new planet was full of strange, wonderful things. Scylla, however, couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The planet felt alive, its creatures lurking just out of sight. Yet nothing had attacked them directly, only the occasional strange noise in the night. It was during one of these quiet nights that Scylla decided to teach Lyra something important. As the stars sparkled above them, Scylla held her daughter close, her voice soft but firm. "Lyra, listen to me carefully," Scylla said. "We need to stay alert. This planet is not like home. The creatures here, the weather, everything is different. We must be prepared for anything." Lyra nodded, her wide eyes focused on her mother's serious face. She knew that their situation was not normal, even if she didn't fully understand why. "I will protect you always," Scylla continued. "But you must learn to protect yourself too. Do you understand?" Lyra squeezed her mother's hand. "I'll learn, Mother. I promise." Scylla's heart swelled with pride. Her daughter was so much stronger than Scylla sometimes gave her credit for. The world had tested them both, and though they were alone, Scylla knew that Lyra was her greatest ally. Together, they were a team. The following day, Scylla and Lyra ventured out into the forest to find more food. The sun was high in the sky, and the air was warm, but there was still a cool breeze that made the trees sway gently. As they walked, Scylla kept a careful eye on their surroundings. There were more strange tracks in the dirt, some large, some small, and the plants around them seemed to have a faint, unnatural glow. It was as if the entire planet was alive, watching them. Lyra picked a berry from a bush and showed it to her mother. "Can I eat this one?" Sela squinted at the berry. It was a deep purple, glowing faintly under the sunlight. She had learned to be cautious with unfamiliar plants, but this one didn't seem harmful. "It's safe," Sela said, and Lyra popped it into her mouth. "Yummy," Lyra said, her face lighting up with joy. Sela smiled, relieved that the berry didn't cause any problems. But as she watched her daughter, a feeling of unease tugged at her. The quiet had grown oppressive. It was as if the air itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Suddenly, Sela heard a rustling in the bushes nearby. Her senses immediately went on alert. She pulled Lyra close, whispering, "Stay behind me." A figure emerged from the trees, and Sela's breath caught in her throat. It was another creature, tall, with fur like the trees and eyes that glowed softly in the shade. It didn't look dangerous at first glance, but Sela wasn't sure. It stood still, watching them. Lyra's hand tightened around Sela's, but she didn't make a sound. Sela's mind raced. Was this an enemy, or something else? The creature tilted its head and took a cautious step toward them. Sela didn't move. She waited, her body tense, ready to defend. But then, unexpectedly, the creature made a low, gentle sound, like a soft hum. It didn't look threatening. Slowly, Sela lowered her guard, still cautious. "Stay close, Lyra," she whispered, and they both watched the creature carefully. The creature seemed curious, not aggressive. It stepped forward, moving closer, its eyes fixed on the glowing rock that Lyra still held in her hand. Then, as if satisfied, it turned and disappeared into the trees, vanishing as silently as it had come. Sela exhaled, her heart still racing. "That was strange," she murmured. Lyra looked up at her, her eyes wide with wonder. "Was it friendly, Mother?" Sela thought for a moment before answering. "I'm not sure. But for now, we stay careful. We don't know what else is out there." The encounter left Sela feeling uneasy, but it also reminded her of something important. The world was full of surprises. Maybe not all of them were bad. Maybe in this strange, new place, there was still hope for them. As the sun began to set, Sela and Lyra made their way back to the cave. The evening was quiet, but in Sela's mind, the questions continued to swirl. Could they really survive here? Was the planet as peaceful as it seemed, or was there danger waiting just around the corner? She didn't know the answers yet, but as she looked at her daughter's face, so full of trust, she realized one thing. No matter what the world threw at them, they would face it together. The days passed slowly, and Sela and Lyra grew more familiar with their new home. They had found a rhythm in their daily life, gathering food, exploring the planet, and trying to make the best of their situation. Sela was teaching Lyra how to build small shelters using branches and leaves, and how to identify the safest paths through the forest. It wasn't easy, but Sela's determination to protect her daughter made every challenge worth facing. The planet, though strange, began to feel a little less foreign. The strange, glowing rocks and the mysterious creatures that sometimes wandered close to their cave were still a mystery, but nothing had posed a serious threat, at least not yet. One afternoon, Sela and Lyra ventured further into the forest than they had before. Sela had noticed that the trees seemed to form a path, leading deeper into the heart of the forest. She thought it might be a good idea to explore this route. There might be new resources to discover. Lyra, always eager to explore, skipped ahead, humming softly to herself as she walked. "Stay close, Lyra," Sela called out, her voice firm but gentle. "Remember what we've talked about. Stay alert." Lyra nodded and returned to walking beside her mother. The forest was quiet, with only the sounds of birds chirping and the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind. It was peaceful, almost like a dream. But Sela kept her senses sharp. She knew that even in peaceful places, danger could be lurking. After a few hours of walking, they reached a small clearing. The sunlight filtered through the thick canopy of trees above, casting dappled patterns on the ground. The air smelled fresh and clean, and the sound of a nearby stream could be heard faintly in the distance. "This is nice," Lyra said, smiling. "We should come here more often, Mother." Sela smiled back, though her eyes were scanning the surroundings. The place felt safe, but she didn't like how quiet it was. "Maybe," she said, her voice thoughtful, "but we must always be cautious. You never know what might be hiding." As if to prove her point, Sela's sharp ears caught the sound of something moving quickly through the underbrush. It was too fast, too quiet. It wasn't the wind or a simple animal. "Lyra," Sela whispered urgently, pulling her daughter close. "Get behind me." Lyra's face showed confusion and fear, but she did as she was told, her small hands gripping Sela's tunic tightly. Just as Sela stepped forward, a large creature emerged from the bushes. It was unlike anything she had seen before. Its body was long and covered in thick, dark fur. Its legs were powerful, and its claws looked sharp enough to tear through metal. It had a set of glowing eyes that locked onto them, its stare cold and calculating. The creature growled, low and threatening, as it took a few slow steps toward them. Sela's heart raced, but she didn't panic. She knew they couldn't outrun it. They would have to fight or find a way to escape. Her mind raced through the options. Was there anything they could use? Anything she could do to protect Lyra? The creature growled again, louder this time, and its claws scraped against the ground. It was getting closer. "Stay behind me, Lyra," Sela said again, her voice steady despite the danger. The young girl clung to her mother, her wide eyes filled with fear. Sela wished she could protect her from the fear, but she knew that now they had to face this danger head-on. Sela took a step forward, her eyes never leaving the creature. She had no weapons, nothing more than her knowledge of survival. She reached for the small energy device that was attached to her belt. It was a tool she had used for many years, part of her advanced technology. It wasn't a weapon, but it might just be enough to defend them. The creature took another step forward, its massive form looming over them. Sela activated the energy device, and a bright blue light flickered to life in her hand. The light pulsed, creating a barrier of energy in front of them. The creature hesitated, its glowing eyes flicking from the light to Sela's face. The creature snarled, but it didn't approach. It seemed to sense that it was no longer facing an easy target. Sela's grip tightened on the energy device, her body tense. She was ready to defend her daughter, no matter the cost. Lyra, still hidden behind Sela, whispered, "What's it doing, Mother?" "I don't know, little one," Sela said softly, her eyes never leaving the creature. "But we're not going to let it hurt us." For a long moment, the creature just stood there, growling softly. It seemed to be testing the energy barrier, pacing in a circle around them. Sela's heart pounded in her chest, but she remained calm. She had to protect Lyra. That was all that mattered. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the creature stopped. It looked at them for a moment longer before it backed away slowly, disappearing back into the forest without a sound. Sela waited for several moments, her breath slow and controlled. Only when the creature was truly gone did she allow herself to relax, releasing the energy device. "We're safe," Sela said, her voice calm, though her mind was racing. "For now." Lyra looked up at her, her face full of wonder and fear. "What was that, Mother?" Sela knelt down, pulling Lyra close. "I don't know, but we can't stay here for long. It might come back." With the danger past, Sela quickly gathered their things and started making their way back to the cave. Her thoughts were filled with worry. This planet, despite its beauty, was far more dangerous than she had first realized. But no matter the danger, she would not let anything happen to her daughter. They would survive, together. The following days after their close encounter with the strange creature were filled with tension. Sela was more cautious than ever. The once peaceful forest now felt like a place of hidden dangers. Every rustling leaf, every shadow seemed to carry a threat. Yet, Sela knew she had to keep moving forward. They couldn't stay in the cave forever. "Mother," Lyra said one afternoon, her voice breaking through the silence of their makeshift camp, "do you think we'll ever get back home?" Sela paused. She had been quiet, lost in her thoughts about how they could survive. She looked down at her daughter, seeing the uncertainty in her eyes. Lyra was still so young, so innocent. She deserved to know that everything would be okay, even though Sela wasn't sure herself. "I don't know, sweetheart," Sela replied gently, brushing a stray lock of hair away from Lyra's face. "But I promise you this, as long as we have each other, we'll always find a way." Lyra smiled weakly, but Sela could see the doubt lingering behind her eyes. The truth was, Sela wasn't sure if they would ever find their way back to their people. The crash had scattered their fleet across this unknown planet, and with no way to communicate with the outside world, she couldn't even be sure if anyone else had survived. All she had was her daughter, and that was enough for now. They spent the next few days scouting the area, looking for food and fresh water. Sela noticed a small stream a few miles from their cave, its water clear and cold. It was a small relief in a world full of uncertainties. They had learned to make do with what they had, using their wits to stay alive. One afternoon, as they were returning from their search for food, Sela felt something shift in the air. It was subtle at first, just a feeling in the pit of her stomach, a sense that something was wrong. She stopped, her senses on high alert. The air was still, and there were no sounds of birds or animals. The forest was unusually quiet, and Sela couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. She crouched down, signaling for Lyra to be silent. The young girl, sensing her mother's unease, obeyed without question, crouching beside her. Sela's sharp eyes scanned the trees, but she couldn't see anything out of the ordinary. Still, her instincts told her to be careful. It wasn't until she heard the faint sound of footsteps behind them that she realized what was wrong. Someone, or something, was approaching. Sela's heart pounded in her chest. She turned to Lyra, her voice low but urgent. "Stay behind me, and don't make a sound." Lyra nodded, her face pale with fear. Sela slowly stood, her eyes never leaving the direction of the sound. Whoever, or whatever, it was getting closer. Her hand instinctively went to the energy device at her waist. She didn't want to use it. Then, out of the trees, emerged a figure. This time, it wasn't the wild creature from before, but a person, a stranger. The figure was tall, wearing simple clothing, and carrying a large pack on their back. They had the appearance of a traveler, though Sela couldn't be sure whether they were friend or foe. The stranger stopped when they saw Sela and Lyra, their eyes widening with surprise. There was a long moment of silence between them. Sela was still on edge, but she didn't want to make a move unless she was sure the stranger was a threat. The stranger spoke first, their voice calm but wary. "I didn't expect to find anyone out here." Sela's grip on her energy device loosened slightly. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice cautious but firm. The stranger looked at her, then at Lyra, before responding. "I'm Alan. I crash-landed here a few weeks ago. Like you, I assume." Sela's heart skipped a beat. Could it be? Someone else had survived. "I'm Sela," she said, her voice softer now that she knew they weren't alone. "This is my daughter, Lyra." Alan nodded, his eyes lingering on the young girl. "I've been searching for anyone who might have survived the crash. I didn't know if I was the only one left." Sela studied him carefully. Alan didn't appear to be a threat, but she had learned to trust her instincts in these uncertain times. Still, she couldn't let her guard down just yet. "Are you alone?" she asked, her voice steady. Alan hesitated before nodding. "Yes, I was part of another ship that crashed here, but everyone else is gone. I've been trying to find any sign of other survivors." Sela's heart sank. The possibility that they were the only two left weighed heavily on her mind. But she couldn't let herself dwell on that now. They needed to focus on surviving. "We've been trying to find a way to communicate with the others," Sela said, but there's no way to reach anyone. The ship's systems are down, and I haven't been able to fix them." Ellen's expression softened. "I understand. I've tried everything, too. But I think we may be able to help each other. I've discovered a place, about a day's journey from here, that might be safe. There's an old station there. Maybe we can find something that could help us get in touch with the others." Sela considered this. A safe place. A station. It sounded like a glimmer of hope. They hadn't had much luck so far, and the idea of finding something, anything, that could help them communicate with the outside world felt like a lifeline. "I'll go with you," Sela said after a moment. "But I'm not taking any chances. We'll go together. And we'll be careful." Ellen nodded, understanding her caution. "Of course. I'll lead the way. We'll stick together." With a new sense of purpose, Sela and Lyra followed Alan as he led them through the forest. For the first time in weeks, Sela felt a spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they weren't alone in this struggle after all. And maybe this strange planet had more surprises in store than they could have imagined. Sela, Lyra, and Alan walked through the dense forest together, each step taking them further from the safety of the cave that had been their home for so long. The air felt different today, cooler, with a slight breeze that carried the scent of the strange plants and flowers that grew all around them. As they traveled, the trees grew thicker, their branches creating a canopy that shielded the ground from the sunlight. It was darker here, and the sounds of the forest were more pronounced. The occasional rustling of leaves, the call of distant creatures, and the gentle swish of grass underfoot all reminded Sela that this was not their home. Still, there was a sense of determination in her that pushed her forward. They were no longer completely alone. With Alan's company, there was a new sense of hope, an idea that they could find something, or someone, that would help them get off this planet. Alan led the way, his pace steady as he navigated the path he had come to know well. Sela kept a careful watch on their surroundings, her instincts never allowing her to fully relax. Despite the sense of safety that came with traveling in a group, Sela knew that danger could strike at any moment. Lyra walked beside her mother, skipping along, her small hands gently brushing the leaves and flowers that grew along the path. Her carefree nature had not faded, despite everything they had been through. She still smiled, still found joy in the little things. But Sela could see the weariness in her eyes, a quiet sadness that lingered behind her daughter's bright expressions. Lyra missed their old life, the life they had before the crash. "Are we going to be okay, Mother?" Lyra asked quietly, her voice almost lost in the rustling of the trees. Sela glanced down at her daughter, her heart aching at the question. She wanted to say yes, to tell Lyra that everything would be fine, but she couldn't lie. The truth was, Sela didn't know if they would be okay. They had survived so far, but survival was not the same as safety. "We will be, Lyra," Sela said softly, her hand brushing the top of her daughter's head. "As long as we stay together, we will be fine." Lyra looked up at her, a small smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "I believe you, Mother." They continued walking, the journey growing longer as the sun began to dip lower in the sky. The sky, once a bright blue, was now tinged with pink and orange, signaling that night would soon fall. Sela knew they needed to find shelter before darkness completely overtook the forest. "We should find a place to camp soon," Sela said, her voice low and practical. "We don't want to be out here after dark." Alan nodded, his eyes scanning the trees ahead. "There's a clearing not far from here. We can make camp there." As they approached the clearing, Sela felt a strange sense of relief. The area was open, with tall grass swaying gently in the evening breeze. A small creek ran through the clearing, its water sparkling under the fading light. It looked peaceful, almost serene. And for a moment, Sela allowed herself to believe that things might get better. They set up camp quickly, with Alan building a small fire while Sela and Lyra gathered more branches and leaves to make a simple shelter. Despite the beauty of the clearing, Sela remained cautious, her eyes constantly scanning the surrounding trees. The forest may have appeared calm, but she knew that calm could quickly turn into chaos. As the fire flickered to life, casting a warm glow around them, Lyra sat beside it, her face glowing in the firelight. She had been unusually quiet since their journey began, and Sela knew that her daughter was still adjusting to the presence of the stranger, Alan. Though he seemed kind enough, it wasn't easy for either of them to trust someone new, not after everything they had been through. Alan, sensing the tension, smiled at Lyra. "It's safe here," he said gently, sitting down on the other side of the fire. "No wild animals, no danger. Just us for now." Lyra nodded but didn't speak. Zila understood her daughter's hesitance. Trust took time, and they had learned to be cautious in this new world. But they couldn't afford to be completely isolated, either. Alan had shown them a path forward, a chance for something better than the uncertainty of the forest. After a few moments of silence, Alan spoke again. "I know you're worried," he said, looking directly at Sela. "But I've been to this station before. It's old, but it might still have what we need. There could be equipment that can help us communicate with other survivors, or at least give us some direction." Sela nodded slowly. "I hope you're right. We need to find something, anything, that could help us leave this planet." Alan's expression softened. "I know. I feel the same way. But remember, we're not alone anymore. We have each other." Sela glanced over at her daughter, who was now watching the fire, her small hands resting on her knees. Despite the dangers they had faced, despite the fear and uncertainty, Lyra was still her bright light in the darkness. The love she had for her daughter gave Sela the strength to keep moving forward, no matter how hard things became. The night fell around them, the stars emerging one by one in the clear sky. Sela lay awake, listening to the sounds of the forest. The crackling of the fire, the distant calls of unknown creatures, and the gentle rustling of the leaves were the sounds of their world now. Sela wondered how long they could survive here, how long they could endure in this strange and hostile place. But as she looked at Lyra, who was finally asleep, curled up in the warmth of the fire, Sela knew one thing for certain. No matter what happened, she would do whatever it took to protect her daughter. They would survive. Together. The night passed quietly, the crackling fire the only sound that kept the dark forest at bay. Sela kept herself alert, her senses attuned to the world around her. But as the hours passed, the forest seemed to settle into an uneasy calm. Her thoughts drifted back to the crash. The chaos, the fear, the helplessness. It was hard to forget how quickly their lives had changed. But she couldn't afford to dwell on that now. She had Lyra to protect, and a new path was ahead of them. The station that Alan had spoken of could be their way out. By dawn, the camp was packed, and they began their journey again. The sky above was lightening with the first rays of the sun. The forest looked different in the daylight, less foreboding, but still strange. The shadows from the previous night had disappeared, but the sense of mystery lingered in the air. Alan led the way again, his pace steady and confident. Sela stayed close behind, always keeping an eye on their surroundings. Lyra, as always, kept her curiosity high, but she moved quietly now, as though the forest had taught her caution. As they walked, Alan spoke occasionally, sharing details about the path they were taking. "The station is a few more miles from here," he explained. "It was once used for research. I found it by accident when I was exploring. It's in a valley, hidden from the main routes. I'm hopeful that there are still working systems inside." Sela nodded, feeling a flicker of hope. A research station. It sounded promising. If they could find anything there, something to help them make contact with their people or find a way off this planet, it could change everything. The thought of returning home, of seeing other survivors, filled her with a longing she hadn't allowed herself to feel in weeks. Lyra walked beside her mother, her small hand brushing against the tall grass as they walked. She had begun to ask more questions about the station. "What's it like, Mother?" she asked. "Will it be like the ship?" Sela smiled softly, kneeling down to her daughter's level. It's different from the ship, sweetheart. It's a place where people studied things like plants, animals, and the stars. Maybe we'll find something that can help us. Lyra's eyes lit up with curiosity. Will we find other people there? Sela's smile faded slightly, but she kept her voice gentle. I don't know, darling, but we might find something useful. And maybe, just maybe, we'll find a way to contact someone who can help us. The words were hopeful, but the truth was that Sela had no idea what they would find at the station. It could be abandoned, with nothing left but old equipment and broken systems, or it could be their chance to finally reach the outside world. She couldn't allow herself to get too hopeful, but she couldn't ignore the possibility either. As they continued on the trail, the forest began to open up. The trees thinned out, and the ground became rockier. Soon, they were walking along the edge of a wide valley. The view was breathtaking. The valley stretched out before them, with rolling hills on one side and towering cliffs on the other. The air was fresh, and the distant sound of rushing water could be heard from a river somewhere below. We're getting closer, Ellen said, pointing toward a narrow gap in the cliffs. The station is hidden in there, near the river. It's not easy to spot, but I know the way. Sela nodded. We'll follow you. They descended into the valley, carefully making their way down the rocky path. The journey was slow, but the thought of the station ahead kept them moving. The ground was uneven, and Sela's heart skipped a beat every time she heard a strange noise or saw movement in the distance. The forest felt more alive here, and though there were no visible dangers, Sela couldn't shake the feeling that they were still being watched. Finally, after what felt like hours, they reached the gap in the cliffs that Alan had pointed out. The entrance to the station was barely visible, hidden behind a wall of thick vines and moss-covered rocks. Ellen moved forward with purpose, brushing aside the vines and revealing a set of metal doors half buried in the earth. This is it, Alan said, his voice a mixture of excitement and caution. It's not much, but there's a chance we can find something useful inside. Sela stepped forward, her hand resting on the cold metal of the door. She hesitated for a moment, then nodded. Let's see what's inside. With a quiet hiss, the doors slowly opened, revealing the dark interior of the station. The air inside was musty, filled with the smell of old machinery and dust. Sela's eyes quickly adjusted to the low light, and she could make out the outlines of metal tables, equipment, and storage containers. It looked abandoned, empty, except for the echoes of their footsteps. We should be careful, Sela said, her voice low. We don't know what we'll find in here. Alan nodded in agreement. I've been inside before, but it's been a long time. The station was deactivated after the crash. Still, there's a chance we might find something that works. They moved cautiously through the narrow hallways, exploring room by room. The walls were lined with old computers, some of which flickered weakly when Alan pressed a button. Sela's heart raced every time a screen lit up, but each time, the systems were either damaged or offline. I was hoping for more. Alan muttered, his voice tinged with frustration. There has to be something here. Sela didn't respond. She kept searching, her fingers running across old equipment. Then, just as she was about to give up hope, she found something. A small console tucked away in a corner of the room, half covered by debris. It looked ancient, its buttons worn and faded, but there was a faint glow coming from its screen. Sela's breath caught in her throat. Could this be it? Alan, look, she called out. Alan hurried over to her, his eyes widening when he saw the console. This could be what we need. With a steady hand, Sela pressed a button. The screen flickered to life, and for the first time in weeks, a sense of hope filled her heart. Sela's fingers trembled as she watched the console flicker to life. The screen was filled with static for a few moments before a line of text appeared, blinking in a steady rhythm. It was the first sign of life they had seen in this abandoned station, and Sela couldn't help but feel a rush of excitement mixed with caution. What if this was the breakthrough they had been waiting for? Alan, standing beside her, was equally tense, His eyes narrowed as he read the text on the screen. This is a communication terminal, but it's old. I've never seen one like this before. Sela leaned in closer, her heart racing. Do you think it can still work? I don't know, Alan replied, his voice uncertain. The systems here are outdated, but there might be a chance. If we can access the main network, we could reach other survivors. Sela's eyes flickered to Lyra, who was standing a few feet away, looking curiously at the flickering screen. Sela had kept her daughter close ever since they began their journey to the station, not wanting her to be too far from her side in this strange and uncertain place. Lyra's small face was filled with a quiet wonder, her eyes wide as she took in the surroundings. Do you think we can get a message through? Sela asked, her voice filled with hope. Alan didn't respond immediately. He was examining the console, pressing a few buttons, and trying to coax the system into responding. The screen flickered again, this time showing a series of codes that Sela didn't understand. But Alan's eyes lit up when he saw something, a flashing light on the corner of the screen, indicating an incoming signal. There's something coming through, Alan said, his voice sharp with surprise. I think we've made contact. Sela's breath caught in her throat. Could it really be? Was there someone else out there? After all the days of searching and wandering, the possibility that they might not be completely alone was a glimmer of hope she had dared not fully imagine. Alan quickly began typing, his fingers moving over the keyboard with practiced speed. The screen flashed again, and this time, a message appeared, clearer than anything they had seen so far. Hello. Is there anyone out there? This is KALO from THERKM Expedition. Sela's heart pounded in her chest. Kaler. A name. A person. This wasn't a malfunction or a random signal. This was a message from another survivor. Alan glanced at Sela. It's a response. Someone's out there. They're probably part of the same fleet that crashed here. Sela's mind raced. Can we respond to them? Alan didn't waste any time. He typed quickly, trying to find the right codes and commands to send a reply. As the minutes stretched on, the tension in the room grew. Lyra, sensing the gravity of the moment, quietly sat down on the floor, her hands folded in her lap, watching her mother and Alan work. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Alan looked up, a relieved smile on his face. We're ready, I sent a reply. The screen flickered again, and soon another message appeared. Reispo NSE RECIVD. Please stand by. Orcs or DNA is. Sela could hardly believe it. They were finally making contact. There was a chance. There was hope. She turned to Alan, her voice trembling slightly with emotion. This is it. We're not alone. There are others out there. Alan nodded, his expression serious but relieved. We need to follow those coordinates. It could lead us to other survivors, maybe even a way off this planet. Without wasting another moment, Alan began to input the coordinates into the system. The screen updated with a map, showing the location of a nearby settlement or outpost. It was not far from their position, just a day's journey away. Sela's heart swelled with a mixture of excitement and anxiety. They had to reach this place. They had to follow the signal and find the others. We can do this, Sela said, her voice filled with determination. We're going to find them. We'll be okay. Alan glanced over at her and smiled. We will. Let's go. The three of them quickly packed up their camp, the excitement of the new discovery giving them a renewed sense of energy. The journey ahead still held challenges, but now there was a clear purpose. They had a direction. And for the first time in weeks, Sela allowed herself to believe in the possibility of rescue. They set out immediately, following the map that had appeared on the console. The path was familiar, the same rocky terrain they had crossed earlier. But now, it seemed different. The air felt lighter, and the weight of uncertainty that had hung over them for so long began to lift. As they traveled, Sela kept looking over at Lyra, her daughter walking beside her with a quiet smile on her face. The little girl was no longer anxious. She had hope, too. Sela could see it in her eyes. They were going to find other survivors. They were going to make it. The hours passed, and the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the valley. They continued walking in the fading light, the thought of what lay ahead driving them forward. But even as hope began to fill Sela's heart, she couldn't forget the dangers of the planet. They had already encountered unexpected creatures and unknown threats. They couldn't be certain that reaching the settlement would be easy or safe. But for now, Sela allowed herself to feel something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. The journey ahead was still uncertain, but it no longer felt impossible. As they moved through the night, the stars shining above them like distant beacons, Sela couldn't help but feel that this was the beginning of something new, something that would lead them home.